Dr. Daniel Amen is a psychiatrist, brain imaging expert, best-selling author, and medical director of the Amen Clinics. He has pioneered the use of brain imaging in clinical psychiatric practice and is a noted expert in the field of the brain and behavior. Dr. Amen's breakthrough research and insights provide hope and more effective treatment for millions of people today.
There are many people who are anxious or depressed or obsessive, prone to anger, they have attentional problems, and they thought their problems were all in their head, purely psychological, if you will. In the research that I've done, what we found is that these and many other problems are brain-based problems, and that when we optimize the brain, their lives become better. We often say, change your brain, change your life, and that's what we've seen. Today we are going to talk about the most common psychiatric disorder in children and one of the most common psychiatric disorders in adults. Now I have to tell you, I know more about ADD than I want to know. I'm a child psychiatrist. Half the kids that you see have ADD. If you look at a typical child psychiatric practice, it's so common that it fills up about half of our slots. Well, in addition, this is my oldest, who I adopted when he was 2.5. He was diagnosed with ADD without hyperactivity at the age of 12. Now, how can you live in the house of a child psychiatrist and not get the diagnosis until you're 12 years old? Well, because he was really smart. And he was never hyperactive. And was never really a behavioral problem. But a half an hour of homework always took him 4 hours to do, with his mother yelling and screaming at him to sit down and get it done. His room always followed the second law of physics, which is entropy. Things go from order to disorder. I used to look at his room and go, do you plan to have it this messy? How does that happen? I mean, we'd clean it up every Sunday. And by Sunday night, it was a mess. His handwriting, even in the 8th grade, was like a 3rd grader's, if that. And teachers used to always say, lots of potential, but he's a space cadet. In fact, when he joined the Young Astronauts program in 2nd grade, I went, it's perfect for him. He's a space cadet, this works. Now, I adopted Anton. So I think I'm biologically clean of this stuff because ADD runs in families. This is the most genetic disorder under the sun. If you see a child with ADD, you should screen their moms and dads, because odds are it's coming from one of them. It's so genetic that if I see a child and they have ADD and neither of their parents have ADD, I look at the parents to see if the child looks like the parents. Think maybe they got switched at birth. It's really that genetic. Okay, now I think I'm biologically clean of this stuff. This, you'll notice, is my beautiful daughter. She was always the perfect child, always easy, always sweet, room's always clean, homework's always done. 9.5 times out of 10 when you ask her to do something, she'd do it the first time without giving you grief. If I only had this child, I would be a terrible child psychiatrist. Because I would think she was this cool because of me. I'm such a good dad. Well, God knew that I was like that. So God gave me Caitlin. Hyperactive from before birth. She was so active inside her mother's womb, we thought she was going to be a boy. Well, she wasn't. But she went from crawling to running at the age of 9 months. Trying to hold her at a year was like trying to hold a live salmon. So hyperactive. In fact, I used to, when I would put her in her bed at night, in her crib at night, I bought a net so that I could zip her in because she kept getting out. And I didn't want her to have a head injury, crawling out of the thing and falling out. It's like, no, we're not having a head injury. One of my friends said, Dad, don't you think she's going to grow up feeling like a criminal? It's like, better that than getting a head injury. I had a spiritual crisis because of this child. Having Roman Catholic roots at the time when she was little, I was going to a Roman Catholic church. And, Catholics have this really stupid thing where children go into church with you, little ones. And she was so awful. I mean, in the middle of Mass, she's like climbing over the pews, blurting out in the middle, just a ruckus. And so I would take her outside and basically threaten her life. And I'm worried about her eternal soul because go to church, get your life threatened. I mean, she's not going to want to go to church. Plus, it was bad for business. You know, as a child psychiatrist, I've seen half the children in the congregation. And it's bad if your child is the worst one. They don't trust you. And so for like 2 years, I stopped going to church. I can't deal with it. And she's 3 years old and still very hyperactive. In fact, have you ever seen children on little yellow leashes in the mall? I believe in little yellow leashes. My problem is I wrote a column in the local newspaper where I was living, and when I would go to the mall, people would recognize me. You're Dr. Amen. Hi, Dr. Amen. I really liked your column. And I just couldn't deal with, hi, Dr. Amen. I liked your column, but why is your child on a leash? And so what I used to do with Caitlin is put her in her stroller and tie her shoes together so she couldn't get out. And I'm not proud of that. But what you find when you have these children, you do things just to survive. Having a hyperactive child is chronic stress. They disorganize families. Families are often fighting with each other. They're frustrated. And one of the reasons is with these kids, you always have to watch them. I remember one time I drove up to my office. Caitlin was 3 years old. She was in the back. And by the time I got out of my seatbelt and went to get her, she'd already got out of the car and ran across the parking lot. And so you imagine the thoughts in my head, because I already told you about my basal ganglia, and I can predict the worst. You know, I see her dead, bleeding. You know, her mother's now really mad at me because I had her killed. You have to watch them all the time. You become hypervigilant, which is in a form of a post-traumatic stress disorder, right? People watch because some bad thing has happened, so I had to watch her all the time. So now she's 3 years old, still very hyperactive. And what I knew being a child psychiatrist is 30% of 3-year-olds look hyperactive. Only 5% of 4-year-olds look hyperactive. So the first time you can really accurately diagnose ADD is 4 years old. It's very important because in the last 10 years, the incidence of children under 4 being put on stimulant medication has tripled. And that's probably a mistake because some of these kids will outgrow it. We think it's a brain maturational lag for those particular kids. So I go back to church but leave her at home. And now, you know, Catholics have this interesting thing. You light candles at church and you put a little extra in the offering. Well, rather than $10 in the offering, I was like putting hundreds in the offering, hoping maybe God will bless this child. I write the Pope, hoping the Pope will send a blessed picture put by her bed. But the Pope must have had an ADD secretary because nobody wrote me back. I went to Oral Roberts University. Oral lives in Newport Beach. I'm making a pilgrimage. So Oral can put his hands on this little child's head. But she would wiggle so much, she probably wouldn't stay long enough to get the right blessing. Anyways, 4 years old, I took her to a colleague of mine who diagnosed her with ADHD, capital H, and oppositional defiant disorder. Now that sort of hurt my feelings, because oppositional defiant disorder, many therapists think is a disorder of bad parents. Parents who aren't firm enough, parents who aren't tough enough, parents who aren't consistent enough. And I have to tell you, we were firmer, tougher, and more consistent with her than we were with the other two that weren't giving us nearly the trouble. And so I sort of knew it had something to do with something else. And I'm so grateful because at the time, the therapist was really good. She asked me about my childhood, my family, and then she asked Caitlin's mother. And Caitlin's mother grew up in a very abusive alcoholic home. And this pattern, I actually did my research on grandchildren of alcoholics, because I had 3 of them, and is very common in children or grandchildren of alcoholics. It's a pattern that we'll learn about. I call it over-focused ADD, where they have both obsessive features and attentional features. So I won't tell you much more about my own family, but I want you to know I know more about this than I want to. Out of the 20,000 scans we've done in my clinic, 10,000 of them were for people who had a primary diagnosis of ADD. And what I've come to learn is ADD is not one thing. I mean, we sort of think it's one thing, but it's a number of different things. And one treatment doesn't fit everybody. Why is Ritalin such a controversial medication? Because for some people, it's a miracle. It works and changes their whole life in a positive way. And for other people, it's a nightmare. And you need to know who it's going to work on and who it's not. And I'm going to give you sort of a framework for that today. Now, there are a number of myths surrounding ADD. One, it's the designer disease of the new century. ADD is not new. ADD was described over 100 years ago by a pediatrician who described kids who are hyperactive, restless, impulsive, and inattentive. He called them, what did he call them? Constitutionally incorrigible. It's like they were putting a moral label on something that was really a physical problem. Stimulants are not new. Stimulants like Ritalin, the first reported use of a stimulant, Benzedrine, was 1937. There was a physician who consulted to a group home. And what he gave a number of the kids in the group home stimulants to decrease their appetite so they'd lose weight, and found their behaviors got better and their ability to learn got better. Ritalin is one of the oldest psychiatric medications we have. It was released in the United States in 1951. So people go, what are the long-term effects? Well, it's been around for a long time. I mean, it's not like some of the new SSRIs or the new antipsychotics where we don't have a good track record, a pretty good track record with this. Now, having said that, I have concerns about all the kids who are on Ritalin. No one's ever looked at their brain, because sometimes when you look at their brain, it looks toxic. I showed you methamphetamine brains, not nice, or cocaine brains, not nice. Sometimes these get a little toxic feel to them. Many of us are worried ADD is, in fact, increasing in the population. I talked to somebody from the London Times today, and that was their question. Why? Well, in part because it's a genetic disorder. People who have ADD don't finish high school as often. 35% of people with ADD never finish high school. If you don't finish high school, what do you do first? You have sex first. On average, ADD women have their first baby at the age of 20. Women who do not have ADD or learning disabilities, on average, they have their first baby at the age of 26. So what you see over 100 years is an ADD family will have 5 generations and more children per generation, where a non-ADD family will have fewer generations and fewer children. That can change a population very quickly. The next myth is ADD is caused by bad parents or bad teachers. And we keep doing this. I mean, I find myself debating in the media a lot. People go, oh, ADD is a myth. ADD is made up by teachers. The last thing teachers want to do generally is medicate children. That's not their first thought. It's the last thought for parents. They worry about the whole idea of medicine. But, sometimes, like me, they pull their hair out, and it's like, help me. We've done too much of this in psychiatry. We've blamed mothers for autism, refrigerator mothers, remember that? We blame mothers for schizophrenia, called them the schizophrenogenic mothers who put children in double binds. We did that. That's really awful. I mean, I think those are really black eyes for psychiatry, to take people who have families that are suffering and say, it's your fault. I mean, we've done it for depression, we've done it for bipolar. We need to stop it. Now, bad moms don't help. And one of the most effective things you can do is parent training for these kids. Not because parents are bad parents, but because you have to be a superior parent to be able to survive effectively. Heck, I was teaching parent training when I had Caitlin. And it was helpful for me. It was helpful for me to have a structure. And that's why Child Protective Service never came to my door. Because I had these thoughts in my head. But thank God I have frontal lobe function, so I never acted on the thoughts where, you ask me that again, I'm going to kill you. The next myth is ADD is overdiagnosed. I have to tell you, this is a myth. I know you don't want to believe this. Because we hear it everywhere. ADD is overdiagnosed. Let's look at the incidence of it. when you screen a general population of children. It's between 6 to 10%. I was just in Puerto Rico giving a lecture. 8% of the general population of children meet the criteria for ADD. There is not one state in the United States that is above where it should be. Not one. In fact, most of the states, California included, are at 2% of the children are taking medication. The only state that comes close is Louisiana. Why Louisiana? Because they put a lot of prisoners from Canada and other places in Louisiana. So it's an interesting place. So it remains vastly underdiagnosed, especially in boys like my son, non-hyperactive boys, and in all girls. Even if girls are hyperactive. Why? Because we have different societal expectations for girls than we do for boys. If a little boy is having problems, we get really worried because he's got to take care of a family someday. If the little girl is having problems, we sort of pat her on the head and hope she marries somebody nice. Now, how reasonable is that in the first decade of this new millennium? It's not reasonable at all. Because if anything, women do a lot more than men. Women are primary caretakers for children. Not one society on the face of the earth where men are primary caretakers for children. Women are primary caretakers for the elderly. Women are primary caretakers for the house. And 88% of the time, women work outside of the house. Mothers work outside of the house. So what we now have is 2 generations of tired women. If on top of that you put short attention span, distractibility, restlessness, impulse control problems, what you have is a woman that looks demoralized and depressed. And so she goes to her family doctor, and he thinks she's depressed and puts her on Prozac, or one of Prozac's sisters, Zoloft, Lexapro. And SSRIs make ADD worse because they calm down what is already low frontal lobe activity. So now these ADD women are worse, but they don't care that they're worse, which can be a disaster at home because their husband's already frustrated. She's not on time, not getting stuff done, impulsive. And now, because of the SSRI, she has no sex drive. I mean, you can see how this can really tear up a relationship if you don't get the right diagnosis. The next myth is people with ADD should just try harder. I call this the Republican Congress 1994 myth. You know, remember, pull away all the welfare services and these people want to go to work. Tell people with ADD to try harder. And the harder they try, the worse it gets. And it fits so nicely what we see on their brain scans, is that when people with ADD try to concentrate, they get decreased activity in the front part of their brain. And what we see is the harder they try, the worse it gets. That's why they're excitement-seeking. That's why they're conflict-driven. Why? Because they're looking for excitement. They're looking for a thrill. They're looking for something to sort of get turned on about. And it is extraordinarily hard for them because parents will take the common sense approach to ADD kids, which is basically to kick them in the rear end and tell them to try harder. But it doesn't work. And then the kids get demoralized and then they get depressed. And parents are frustrated because they feel like they're not making a difference. And you know when your parents back away from you? When they feel like they have no influence on you. The next myth is ADD is only a minor psychiatric disorder. Oh, it's only ADD. Don't worry about it. Worry about it. 35% of these kids never finish high school. That's a crisis. According to a Mayo Clinic study, they use twice as many medical, non-psychiatric medical services than other kids. Why? Because they make silly decisions. They get injured more often. How many times did I tell Caitlin, don't run in the street? Don't run in the street and spank her bottom at the same time. Don't run. Ball goes in the street. No forethought. I thought that to myself a lot. Life without frontal lobes. And they don't learn easily. It's like you have to over-teach them things to keep them safe. 43% of untreated aggressive hyperactive boys will be arrested for a felony by the time they're 16. Came from work here in Los Angeles by psychologist James Satterfield. to 50% of the prison population when you screen general prison population to meet the diagnostic criteria of ADD. There was a study done at the California Medical Facility in Vacaville, one of the largest prisons in California. They looked at 175 consecutive new admissions to the prison. What they found was 75% of them had childhood histories of hyperactivity or learning disabilities. So if you don't treat it, if you don't pay for it, treatment when they're young, you're going to pay for it. This is going to be a lot more expensive when they're old. 52% of untreated ADD teenagers and adults abuse drugs and alcohol. Study from Joe Biederman's group at Harvard. And the drugs they choose to abuse are alcohol and marijuana because it settles the restlessness they feel, and cocaine and methamphetamines because it stimulates them. Do a drug history. I mean, on every client or patient you see, you should do a drug history. And when you do it, don't do it with any sort of judgment with it. Do it being curious. I want to know everything you've tried, and I want to know how it made you feel. And it's so interesting what they will tell you. Dr. Raymond, I took speed at a party, and everybody was like bouncing off the wall. I sat down and read a book. I balanced the checkbook. I mean, they tell you it's calming rather than you gave me speed, but it's like wired for it. 75% of people with ADD have interpersonal problems. Now, why might that be? How many people here are married? How many people are married? Is it helpful for you to say everything you think in your marriage? Not helpful. Why? Relationships require tact. They require thoughtfulness. People who have ADD just blurt out the first thing that comes into their mind, whether they believe it or not. Right? We all get thoughts that we don't believe. We all get evil, awful thoughts. But they just say them, and it hurts other people's feelings. Plus, they tend to be conflict-seeking. Why? Because they're looking for a jolt. Think of ADD as adrenaline deficit disorder. It's actually a study done in the 80s where they looked at the urines of ADD kids, looking at what's different. Is it serotonin? Is it dopamine? Is it norepinephrine? What is it? It was adrenaline. They had low levels of adrenaline. They also have slower heart rates. They have lower sweat gland activity. And they have low activity in the front part of their brain. So they are looking for excitement. That's why people with ADD cannot do boring things. You should write that down. People with ADD cannot do boring things. It really surprises their parents because say they love something, well, they can do it. But most of life you don't love. 80% of life you just sort of have to do so you can get to that part that you love. Not these kids. If they have a class that bores them, you have to stay on them. If they have a class they love, they do fine. So it confuses parents because parents go, hey, you can do it in history, but why aren't you doing it in math? That means you're not trying. And it's no, love is a drug. Think about the last time you fell in love. Last time you fell in love, your heart rate was going fast. All you could do was think about that person. Love is like having OCD. Right? You're like focused. They need that in order to pay attention. And that's why, as teenage girls, they have multiple relationships. Why? Because they love the idea of falling in love. The stability is not good. It's hard for them. They're good at starting businesses. They're not good at growing businesses. The next myth is everybody outgrows ADD. It's clearly a myth. At least 50% of children with ADD symptoms will have symptoms into adulthood. Most of them have not been diagnosed, and many of them have been misdiagnosed as bipolar or as personality disorders. Anybody you think has a personality disorder, you should at least screen them for ADD. All right, so I'm going to talk to you about 6 different varieties or types of ADD, but what makes it ADD? So I think there are 5 cardinal features of it. So we're going to talk about them. The first one is short attention span. But it's not for everything. It's short attention span for regular, routine, everyday tasks, like schoolwork, paperwork, chores, homework. The things that make life work. For things that are new, novel, highly interesting, stimulating or frightening, people with ADD can pay attention just fine. Why? Because those things have their own adrenaline to them. Okay? New, novel, highly interesting, stimulating, or frightening, they can do just fine. So why do you think in our culture, horror movies thrive? Because this is a perfect population. Scare them to death. They love it. Right? Take somebody like me who tends to be a little bit anxious. No way. Saw the Amityville Horror. Like 20 minutes in, I leave. I go, this is not fun. Right? Activated by basal ganglia. So, now they usually will tell you they can pay attention. It's very important in the history. You see a teenager and you go, can you pay attention? Almost always, the worst ADD kids will go, yes. The insightful ones will go, yes, if I'm interested. The better question is, how long does it take you to do a half an hour of homework? They'll typically tell you it takes an hour. Or 4 hours. Or I don't believe in homework. As if it's a religious issue. Talk to other people, they'll say they don't pay attention very well. Now, ADD is not a disorder that all of a sudden shows up when they're 14. It's something you can actually see evidence of all the way along. Even though my son wasn't diagnosed until he was 12, I clearly saw evidence in the second grade, looking back on it. Short attention span, but not for everything. They're distractible. Now that's different. Distractibility means you see too much, you feel too much, you sense too much, you hear too much. Our brain has an amazing ability to block out distractions, whether planes or the door, your phone, whatever, because you're focused on what you're doing. People with ADD can't do it. They just hear everything, and it makes them crazy. Right? I mean, say, for example, just take a minute and pay attention to your shoes on your feet. Feel them. Feel your socks if you're wearing them. See, now I haven't thought about my shoes since 6 o'clock this morning when I put them on. But now I feel them. Well, I can feel them. I can feel my socks on my ankle. And why don't I think about that all day long? Because I don't need to. So my brain blocks it out. They can't do that. So they're sort of always distracted. Their clothes have to be just right. They cut tags out of shirts. As little ones, they take their clothes off a lot. Caitlin used to take her clothes off all the time, and I'm like, no, she's going to be a stripper. I thought, I have to do a research project on this. What is the incidence of ADD in strippers? I didn't do it. They sleep with fans at night or white noise at night because if they don't, they hear everything going on in the house and they can't sleep. But with white noise, they can. So Caitlin's mother, for years, middle of winter in Washington, D.C. Okay, so they're distracted by the environment. They're disorganized. Oh my goodness. Time and space, they're late. They're always like 7 minutes late. It's so interesting. So if you show up more than 3 times to this class, 7 minutes late, I'm like thinking ADD. Why? Because it's like you don't get ready to go until you're late. It's that adrenaline-seeking behavior. You have to like, oh my, I'm late. And then you can get ready, right? To get ready to be someplace 10 minutes early, it just never happens. There's no adrenaline to sort of get you moving. So they're late. They don't know how long things will take, so they're constantly turning papers in late. And they're begging for extended time. I'm so hoping God will forgive me. But I used to lie to Caitlin's mother all the time. We had to be somewhere at 10. There was no way I would tell her 10. 9 o'clock, I would tell her. And then 9:30, she still wasn't ready to go. I just knew I had to yell at her. And I hated that because it's like chronic stress because I'm like 10 minutes early. And you can see how brain function can interfere with relationships. And if we had to like go to the airport and leave, because my mind sees, we could have a flat tire, there could be a long line. I like do all of the things, so I'm like always early. chronic stress, late. And look at their space, their rooms, their desks, their book bags, their filing cabinets. They just have no natural organization. Things are a mess. So when my book, Change Your Brain, Change Your Life came out, a woman from Seattle, Washington brought her husband to see me, dragged him with the threat of divorce because he didn't think there was any problem. He was an emergency room doctor. Now, I have to tell you, we have seen 200 physicians in my clinic over the years. Half of them are emergency room doctors. Why might that be? The adrenaline, right? We have not seen one ADD dermatologist. There's no adrenaline in rashes. No juice in acne. So, time and space. They don't follow through on things. Oh my goodness, it's so painful for the people around them. They have lots of interests, and they're frequently very interesting people. But they only do things as long as there is intense interest with it. So they'll do something 50% done, maybe even 80% done, and then they won't follow through. I had one college professor I saw who had ADD. I said, how many projects did you start last year? He said, I think about 300. And his wife was so clear. And he only finished 3. And none of them were for me. Because she had like her honey-do list. And it was just very frustrated. They're always off to that next most interesting thing. Sort of like raccoons. You know, if something's shiny, there they are at whatever is shiny. And the thing that gets them into the most trouble is this thing called poor internal supervision. They don't think before they do things. They don't have long-term goals. Underline this. The moment is what matters to them. Not 5 moments from now or a year from now. It's now. The moment is what matters to them. Now, why can that be a problem? Well, say you want to go to medical school. We have to, plan it out. And then you have to follow through over a long period of time. Or you want to get a PhD in psychology, or you want to get a master's degree in psychology. I mean, there's a lot of planning and a lot of consistent effort to make that happen. If you have ADD, you might start and stop, start and stop, start and stop. And it really is draining for you because you can see it's 10 years later and you haven't finished anything. It can really grate on your self-esteem. They also take what I call a crisis management approach to their life. Is they focus on the crises because that's what gives them adrenaline. And there's a big problem with that. High exposure to stress hormones, being chronically stressed, which many ADD people do, it tears up the cells in the hippocampus. Chronic exposure to stress hormones kills cells in the hippocampus, which means it puts them at more risk for memory problems as they age. In addition, high exposure to stress hormones decreases immune system response, so they're probably at higher risk for cancer. So why treat this? I mean, it's so clear, because it helps them stay healthy over a long period of time. Okay, what about some lifespan issues? Well, in the first 12 years, what we often see with ADD is the babies are colicky. They're often very hyperactive and very sensitive to noise, sound, and touch. They have the hallmark symptoms, short attention span, distractibility. They often have poor handwriting, poor organization. They interrupt. They don't achieve to what people think their ability is. They often have problems sleeping, especially problems going to bed at night, and problems getting up in the morning. Waking them is sort of like trying to wake the dead. I had one woman, she had 3 alarm clocks. And she had a state job, and she was always late, despite her 3 alarm clocks. She went to a siren company. She went to an alarm company. She bought a siren. The problem with this, for Yvonne, she lived in a condominium. When she had to get up, everybody in the condominium got up. It was very bad. There's also a very high incidence of bedwetting. in people who have ADD. Very important to, one, diagnose it, and two, treat it, because bedwetting does a serious number on people's self-esteem. Really can make them anxious and nervous and feel badly about themselves. And, you know, when they go in, finally get to sleep, and they go into deep stages of sleep, they go so deeply they don't feel their bladder. And it's not a choice on their part. And we have great treatments for bedwetting. There's a nose spray called DDAVP, an old antidepressant, imipramine, that seems to be very helpful. I mean, there are things that we can do. I love this picture. The classic hyperactive child. All right, what about in adolescence? Often unrecognized, especially in the non-hyperactive kids. Because, you know, at this point, the hyperactivity has been outgrown. They tend to outgrow it as the brain lays down more myelin, especially in the front part of the brain. Settles them down. And adolescence often presents as impulse control disorders or school failure. Basically, the same set of symptoms, but it's presenting differently. If you have a girl who tries to kill herself, you screen her for ADD, because ADD and suicide go hand in hand. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Again, they have sleep problems. School failure often leads to depression, so they may present as depressed, and we give them a typical antidepressant, and we make them worse. Just this week, the FDA is looking at antidepressants and suicide in teenagers. They're asking the wrong question. Do antidepressants cause suicide in children? That is the wrong question. Antidepressants are wonderful medicines for the right person. They're nightmares for the wrong person. But we need to look at who do they help and who do they hurt. But by how they're going about it, they're really giving them a black eye, if you will. And parents are going to be scared, oh no, we're not doing antidepressants. And you know, teenagers can get depressed just like adults can get depressed. Suicide is the 8th leading cause of death in adults, but it is the 3rd leading cause of death in teenagers. So it is something that is very important to treat when it's there. But if they have ADD, you don't want to just treat the depression, because you can make the depression better and the ADD worse. They present with impulse control problems, teenage pregnancy, substance abuse problems. They run away. Why do they run away? Because ADD kids have ADD parents. You get these two sets of people untreated, what do you have? Chronic conflict. A lack of forethought. Parents being impulsive and not remembering what it was like to be a teenager, which is not easy. They have legal problems. They hang out with the wrong crowd. Why? Because they hang out with people who are failing in school. You tend to become like the people you hang out with. That's what I tell teenagers all the time. It's very important who you spend time with, because you know, if you want to be a drug dealer, hang out with drug dealers. If you're hanging out with kids who use drugs, odds are you're going to use drugs. And they have driving problems. It's a very important point. Write this down. Children who have ADD should not drive until they are emotionally 16. And typically, children with ADD that are untreated are 3 to 5 years behind emotionally. They're behind their chronological age. And you need to really think about that. And you need to let them do things at their emotional age, not at their chronological age. And so many kids, when the kids turn 18 or 21, parents are sick of them. Get a job or get out. You know, that's sort of reasonable. Common sense. Except emotionally, they're 14. Would you send a 14-year-old away? No, these are kids that still need to be loved, supervised, and thought about. Don't tell them this, but thought about, you know, I still need to keep my eyes on this like I'd keep my eyes on a 16-year-old or a 14-year-old. It's a critical point. It's potentially a life-saving point, because ADD kids get into more accidents. They get more tickets. They have more trouble with driving. Adults, people with ADD, now, they often run big companies. And we had a recent example where we think one of them was the President of the United States. Right? You think of excitement-seeking behavior, bad judgment, not learning from the mistakes you make, Time magazine said President Clinton was perhaps only a pill away from greatness. ADD has nothing to do with intelligence. I mean, clearly bright, bad judgment. So we often see job failure. I guess being impeached is probably not job success. Many job changes because they get bored easily. They move 4 times more than other people. They have more relationships than other people because they get bored easily. And more affairs. I had one of my ADD patients, and he had like 50 affairs. And, you know, I always try to reframe things in a positive way. It's like, wow, you're really good at getting relationships. But he just said he got bored so easily. Impulse control problems, driving problems. These are people that say they drive better when they're driving fast. They scare the socks off you if you drive with them. Excitement seeking, and they have sleep problems. Now, what causes ADD? Take-home answer is this is genetic. It runs probably on the dopamine genes. A number of studies, especially those by David Cummings, that actually look at the different dopamine genes in the body. And if you have an abnormality in one, there's a whole bunch of them. You have a mildly increased chance. You have an abnormality in 3, you're going to have ADD. So it has to do with our genes. But trauma can cause it, especially trauma to the left front side of the brain. Toxic exposure, oxygen deprivation. Sometimes early brain infections can make you look like you have ADD symptoms. Now, this is a brain class. So we got to talk about the brain as it relates to ADD. As we've seen, we've been looking at the brain for 13 years now, and I started looking at it in ADD kids and adults. Because in 1990, there was a study from the National Institute of Health using PET studies, which are cousin to SPEC studies, in ADD adults. And what it showed is that when ADD adults try to concentrate, they had significant diminished activity in the front part of the brain. And I just went, that makes so much sense. Actually, before then, I was doing something called quantitative EEG, looking at electrical activity in the brains. And what we found is that when ADD people tried to concentrate, they got this surge of frontal lobe slow wave activity. So it's like their brain was turning off when it needed to be turning on. And so, again, as we look at these scans, SPEC is really easy to understand. And I want you to just keep it in your head. We look for good activity, too little, or too much. And if we look at the SPEC camera, that's the camera we use to do this study. It's a nuclear medicine study where we look at blood flow and activity patterns. A healthy scan, full, even, symmetrical activity. Again, encourage everybody, if you think you have a healthy brain, normal brain, call the office. We dearly love it. And some people already called, and I'm grateful, thank you. But full, even, symmetrical activity. That's what we see in our super healthy brains. Now, I'm under no illusion that there are that many people that have these things, just if I make a list of 20 of my friends. Right? I mean, make a list of 20 of your friends. I'll bet you 10 of them are taking medicine, or they should be. Right? I mean, it's just, you know, really healthy is rare in our society. Healthy. Now, looking at the hot spots in the brain, here blue is average activity, red is the top 15%. And the hot spots are usually in the cerebellum. And the cerebellum, back bottom part of the brain, is involved in motor coordination, but also thought coordination, and much more involved in ADD than we ever thought. Cerebellum is very important. All right. So let's look at the different types of ADD. Type 1 is what we call classic ADD. Type 2 is what we think of as inattentive ADD. Now, both of those types have been described for a very long time. They were in the DSM-3, which was released in 1980. Type 3, actually other people had written about, especially Marcel Kinsborn in the Northeast, who talked about overfocused ADD, these kids who couldn't concentrate, yet at times they couldn't stop concentrating. We also look at something we call limbic ADD. So the last 3 of 3 I've described. Limbic ADD is where ADD and depression go together. And stimulants tend to make them cry and tend to make them have terrible rebound. Temporal lobe ADD is with people who have temporal lobe problems with frontal lobe problems. Think of frontal lobe problems with ADD. And they're often aggressive. They have learning problems. So we'll talk about all of these in detail. And the ring of fire is something I didn't describe until 6 years into imaging, but boy, I saw it. I just didn't know what to make of it. These are kids that had super hot brains. And they were diagnosed with ADD very early. And what I've come to believe is that it's a whole bunch of things. It can be early bipolar disorder. It can be that they have an autoimmune disorder. It can be they have allergies to certain kinds of foods which flame their brains. It's lots of different things. But if you give a stimulant to them, 70% of the time you make them worse. So looking at classic ADD, the hallmark symptoms of ADD that we talked about, short attention span, distractibility, disorganization, and so on, plus, so this is ADD plus the H. They're hyperactive. They can't sit still. They're in constant motion. They talk a lot. So, in fact, they're hyperverbal, which I think of as hyperactivity of speech. Impulsive, don't think. I mean, and their impulsivity here is as bad as it gets. Lack forward thinking. And what we see on their scans, especially in adults, is it's actually relatively normal at rest. But when they try to concentrate, they get serious decreased activity in the front part of their brain. Which means the harder they try, the worse it gets. The harder they try, the less judgment they have. And if you put them on the right medicine, and in this case we use stimulants, you can see that their brain gets a lot better. And so if you understand ADD with this model, decreased activity with concentration, that improves with the right treatment, withholding medication from this person is like withholding glasses from someone who can't see. And it's not fair. I mean, if you understand it along this way, it's really neglect not to treat it properly. But because we never look, we can have all this controversy about ADD and go, we should treat them, no, we shouldn't treat them, and so on. The best treatment for classic ADD, stimulant medicines. We have great new stimulant medicines. Adderall is a wonderful medicine. Concerta is a wonderful medicine. Adderall is a combination of dexedrine salts, or dextroamphetamine salts. Concerta is a combination of Ritalin or methylphenidate. It's not a combination, but it is long-acting Ritalin or methylphenidate. There's a new medicine by Eli Lilly, Strattera. I don't really like it very much because it has too many side effects. A lot more side effects than Concerta or Adderall has. Now, medicine-only treatment is bad treatment. That's what most people get, medicine only. And it's not good because they're like whole people. You need to work on their diet. They tend to do better on high-protein, low-carbohydrate diets. Like anybody saw Brain in the News, saw the Atkins diet is associated with lower seizures in kids. The high-protein, low-carbohydrate diet is the Atkins diet. Intense aerobic exercise boosts blood flow to the brain. Boosts serotonin and dopamine levels in the brain. It's the best natural treatment you can do for depression and ADD is get people to exercise on a regular basis. If you want to read a book that'll just scare the socks off you, read Fast Food Nation. Oh my goodness. It'll make you sick. But how are we feeding children today? We're feeding them high sugar, high simple carbohydrate diets that they can get at fast food restaurants. Because we're a fast food society. Especially ADD families are fast food society. I can't tell you the number of times I came home and I was furious because, we're like eating at In-N-Out, or we're like, I'm like, why are we doing that? Because people with ADD don't think about eating until they are hungry. Which means, oh, I'm hungry. Jack in the Box! I'm hungry. And do you know the fast food chains market to children, 2-year-olds? Why? Because they're looking for lifelong customers. In Europe, they ban food advertising to children. Why? Because kids like go to the grocery store, they see the sign for one of the fast food restaurants, and they go, hey, let's go there. And parents love their children, so they always want to please them. How you feed your kids matters. It matters to their brain development. Exercise, high protein, low carbohydrate diet, and parent training. Parent training is essential. Before you do psychotherapy with an ADD child, you should get their parents in and train them how to be the most effective parents possible. Because play therapy does not work with these kids. I know. In my child psychiatry training program, they made me do play therapy with these kids for a year. And I have to tell you, I hated them. Because they didn't get better. I like it when people get better. I'm not happy when people aren't getting better. You know, my self-esteem gets invested in what I do. And I did one 8-week parenting course with the parents of the kids I'd been treating. I sat in with the psychologist and I watched them do the parent training course and I helped them. These kids got so much better so quickly. Very important to get their environment right. So we'll talk about that. Type 2 is what we call inattentive ADD. They have all the ADD symptoms that we talked about, the hallmark symptoms. But in addition to that, rather than being hyperactive, they're spacey. They daydream. They seem internally preoccupied, sluggish, slow-moving, low motivation. This is a 15-year-old girl who, when we saw her, she sort of looked depressed. She was crying, couldn't get her work done. Sweet girl, working her brains out. But, you know, she's staying up every night till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to get her homework done. And when we scanned her, the image on the left, her brain was cold. And it worried me. Her mother had taken Bendectin when she was pregnant with her. Bendectin is the old anti-nausea medicine they pulled from the market because they thought it caused learning disabilities in children. And she didn't want to take medicine because her little sister was on medicine. She didn't want to be anything like her little sister. They had been at war. And so I convinced her to just do one study on medicine to see how it worked. Dramatic positive difference. And so she agreed to take it. And this is a girl who her whole life got B's and C's with great effort. The next reporting period, all A's. The next 6 reporting periods, all A's. She was really bright, but she thought she was stupid. I can't tell you how many times I've had that experience with women. All their lives they thought they were stupid, when in fact they had IQs of 140 or something, and they just couldn't concentrate. And, you know, it sort of blows them away a little bit. It's very exciting. Withholding medicine from her, it's neglect. I mean, let's think about that. We don't want her going the rest of her life with low activity in her brain. She just doesn't feel like she can get it done. If you never look, you never know. The little boy I see who had inattentive ADD, but when we looked at his scan, he had a dent in the left front side of his brain. He had brain injury induced. He was riding his bicycle full speed into the corner of a brick column. On medicine, his brain got much better too. Now, it's not just medicine. Medicine, diet, exercise, the right environment. So, we use the same stimulants. If they don't work, we'll use stimulating antidepressants. High protein, low carbohydrate diet, lots of exercise. Parent training. Why? Because these kids can be conflict seeking too. They just do it in a much more subtle way. So, Gary Larson on inattentive ADD. There's a student with a very tiny brain. Mr. Osborne, may I be excused? My brain is full. That's what it feels like. I remember this girl, she told me, she said, you know, we have block classes. She's in high school. We have block classes. And an 80-minute class seemed like it would last 8 hours. They die in these long classes. But she said, now that I'm on the medicine, that 80-minute class seems like it goes by in 20 minutes. And I love it because I can do it. And that was probably the most telling thing anybody had ever told me. I love it because I can do it. Right? And if you can do stuff, you feel good about it. If you fail, then you get self-esteem problems. If I spent my day fixing Volvos, I would have self-esteem problems. because I'm just no good in that 3D world of car engines. Right? I mean, I'm glad there are other things that I can do. The next type of ADD, which is very common, especially in this group of children and grandchildren of alcoholics, is what we call overfocused ADD. They have all the ADD features, but one thing's very interesting. Their problem paying attention is not that they can't pay attention. It is they cannot shift their attention. And if you can't shift your attention, you can't pay attention. Right? I mean, just go along with what we've talked about today. I mean, we've already talked about 20 ideas. Say, for example, half an hour ago I said something that irritated you. I apologize. I wasn't being conflict-seeking, I promise. But now you've thought about that thing 40 times. And that repetitive thinking about something impairs your ability to track and follow along. And that's the issue with these kids. So they have trouble shifting attention. So they worry. They hold grudges. Things don't go their way, they get upset. They get stuck in patterns of thought. They get stuck in patterns of behavior. They're often argumentative and oppositional. And you tend to see it when there are over-focused family members. So I used to say I would go to cingulate family reunions, because this is due to hyperactivity in the cingulate gyrus, that part of the brain that runs down the middle of your foreheads that when it works too hard, people get stuck on things. So the cingulate family reunions, you know, somebody was drinking. Somebody wasn't coming out because they were obsessively getting ready. You know, somebody was holding a grudge in one room from somebody they hadn't talked to for 12 years in another room. And the children were fighting. You know, no, I won't do it. No, I won't do it. You know, it's interesting if you're a psychiatrist to go to these things. So what we see in over-focused ADD, increased activity in the cingulate gyrus, that part that runs right down the middle of your frontal lobe. This is a case of a little boy who actually wasn't little, he was 16 years old. He came into my office and he refused to talk to me. Actually, I can't tell you what he actually said to me, but it wasn't nice. Sort of like, well, I can't say it, but it was basically, I will never talk to you. And, you know, no matter what I did, he wouldn't talk to me. And he was so awful, his behavior was so horrible at school and at home that I really thought about sending him to a residential treatment program. You know, he came into my office every week with his Oakland Raiders jacket on and hat over his face and, you know, just thought he was constipated. And it got so bad and nothing was working that we were talking about sending him to residential treatment. And I said, look, I said, this isn't working. He knew that. I said, I don't think you're going to be able to live at home much longer because I think it's dangerous for you. I think maybe if we got a scan, it would be helpful. He wouldn't do it. For like months, he wouldn't do it. And finally, when I sort of threatened him, you need to get this scan so I can help figure this out, or you need to go to a residential treatment facility, he went okay and agreed to get the scan. But it was only by accident. I was there that day when they were doing the scan, and I heard a ruckus in the imaging center. And so I walked back there, and there's this kid with his arms folded, refusing to get the scan. And I looked at him, I said, I thought you said you'd do this. I mean, you know this is important. I know, but I won't, and you can't make me. Well, I thought to myself, I'm a child psychiatrist. I know how to get my way with children. So I looked at him and I said, Brian, what'll it take? And he looked at me. $20. Not a problem. Reached in my pocket, found $20. I handed it to him. I said, here, give him your arm. Which he did. No problem at all. I said, by the way, now I'm invested in your scan. Stay. We're going to look at this afterwards together. So cooperative and so sweet. It was so irritating. And so he sat next to me after the scan was. And the image on the left is what we saw on the computer screen. He had the most active frontal lobes I'd ever seen in my life. You see what looks like 3 racing stripes going down the middle of the frontal lobe? So the front is at the bottom, back is at the top. Image on the left. Whoa. Now, all of a sudden, I have empathy for him. I hadn't had empathy for him. I was so irritated that I was being ineffective with him. It really irritated me. And he just looked at it. And then he looked at me. I think this is the first time I saw that his eyes were green. He said, "Do you have something that can help me?" For $20, I said. And he reached again. I said, "No, I'm kidding." I said, "Yeah." I said, "We have good stuff for this." And I put him on Risperdal, one of our new, really good atypical antipsychotic medicines. And even though he wasn't schizophrenic, he probably really wasn't bipolar, he was crazy. I mean, his behavior was so bad he wasn't going to be able to live at home. I mean, that's psychotic. A week later, he didn't have an appointment for 3 weeks. A week later, I walk into my waiting room. There's his mother. And I looked at her, and she saw me. I was going to get a patient. She grabbed me and kissed me. She was cute. I said, "Thank you. What's that for?" "Oh, you can't believe it, Dr. Ammon. He's so much better. He's less anxious. He's less worried. He's less aggressive. He's coming out more and being with the family." Cool. So I saw him a couple of weeks later. No Oakland Raiders jacket. No hat. His hair was combed. He'd taken a shower. He looked at me. He apologized. I went, who are you really? What happened to Brian? Did aliens come and take him? And I asked myself that a lot. Who is he really? Is he really this dark, evil, awful, terrible child you would never want to have in your house? To this very sweet boy. It's a very important question. You've got to ask yourself that question. Who is he really? I think he's really who he is when his brain works right. I paid for his follow-up scan because I so wanted to see it. And that was his scan. Actually, that was his scan 6 months later. I had a scan a month later, and what we showed a month later, it was starting to relax his left frontal lobe. 6 months later, I'd taken everything down. One of the benefits of Risperdal is it takes it down but doesn't crash it. Some of the old antipsychotic medicines crashed it, and that's why people would get that blunt appearance. So, with overfocused ADD, my first medicine of choice is Effexor. Because what Effexor does is it raises serotonin and norepinephrine, so it sort of balances frontal lobe activity. If that doesn't work for whatever reason, I'll use an SSRI, because that relaxes the cingulate gyrus, and then I'll use a stimulant, so I don't take it down too far. If you just put them on an SSRI, you would take down their frontal lobes. If it's terrible overfocused ADD, I use an atypical antipsychotic, like Risperdal or Zyprexa or Abilify. Less protein, high protein, low carbohydrate. High protein, low carbohydrate diets are concentration diets. You do not want to put somebody who can't shift their attention on a concentration diet, right? So they actually do better with more simple carbohydrates in their diet. But get them to exercise. Exercise helps a lot. The next type of ADD, we call it temporal lobe ADD. They have the ADD symptoms. So now I want you to think about the ADD symptoms associated with prefrontal cortex problems. And they have temporal lobe symptoms. Emotional instability, can't predict their moods. They often have memory problems, learning problems, anxiety that comes out of the blue. They might see illusions or shadows. They often have a lot of headaches. They may be too sensitive to other people, and they can be aggressive. I'm going to hurt you. Or the aggression may be internal, I'm going to hurt myself. My third case of ordering a SPECT scan. And someday maybe I'll just do the first 10 I've ordered, because they're all great, amazing cases. My third case was a little 12-year-old boy named Christopher. And Christopher was admitted to the hospital. I was on call, so just by chance, if you believe in that, I was on call. And he had stabbed a boy at school with a pencil in his neck. And he's a very aggressive boy. He'd been diagnosed with ADD at the age of 6, put on Ritalin, made him hallucinate, He then was very aggressive and hospitalized at the age of 9. Put him on dizipramine because they thought he was depressed. Didn't help. When I saw him at the age of 12, he'd been seeing a psychoanalyst in the Napa Valley for 2 years, whose last comment to the mother was that if only she would get in psychotherapy and learn about, deal with her own childhood issues, then this child would get better. I mean, he's basically blaming the mother for this child's problem. Stop that. That's not helpful. And when I saw him, I mean, clearly he had ADD symptoms, but he was very aggressive. And so I ordered my 3rd SPECT scan. He had virtually no activity in his left temporal lobe. And when he tried to concentrate, his frontal lobes completely shut down. So he had ADD symptoms, understood why they put him on Ritalin. But I went, what? No activity in your left temporal lobe. What does that go with? And so I had to go to the scientific literature and went, oh, that's all commonly associated with people who have seizure disorder. Put him on an anticonvulsant. So I put him on Tegretol. And wow, like within 3 weeks, he's like one of the sweetest boys you'd ever meet. And then I put him on a little bit of a stimulant because his frontal lobes still were shutting down. And they worked now because they weren't aggravating his temporal lobe. 5 years later, I got to give a lecture at his school to the student body. And right before the lecture, he came up to me with 5 of his friends and introduced them all to me. And he was so proud that he and I knew each other. I always get emotional when I think about this, because if we hadn't figured it out, where do you think Christopher would be right now? He'd be in jail. And his mother would feel like dirt, like somehow it was her fault. When it was a medical problem. It was a brain problem and not a choice on his part. So, this is a man who came to see me from Normal, Illinois, had been arrested for felony domestic violence, hated himself. And if you look at the scan, what you see in the left prefrontal cortex, so that's the top right, that's his left prefrontal, he got a dent. You're not born with dents in your brain. He had a brain injury, fell from a porch 6 feet head first into a pile of bricks. He damaged his left temporal lobe. So this is ADD induced by trauma. Trauma-induced ADD is often temporal lobe ADD because they hurt the temporal lobes because of where the temporal lobes sit in the brain. Anticonvulsant and a stimulant. He's done fabulous. One of my little children from hell. His mother affectionately called him the child from hell. And I mean, just had the worst looking, toxic brain. And the image on the left is when we first saw him. He had been tried on 16 different medications. You can see his cerebellum is awful. Temporal lobes, frontal lobes are off. Put him on an anticonvulsant. This is one called Carbitrol. Amazing how much better he got. So, with this type of ADD, we do not start with stimulants. This is the type that Kip Kinkle had, the kid who shot 24 people, murdered his mom and dad. We start with anticonvulsants, anti-seizure medicines. In fact, in the Department of Corrections, in the Juvenile Department of Corrections, they did a study with aggressive kids and found that Depakote dramatically decreased aggression in children. The Los Angeles Times got a hold of that, and they're like, they're doing research on children. And Gray Davis, it's one of the reasons they booted him out of there, because he just didn't get it a lot of the time. Gray Davis goes, oh, we're not going to do any research on children. Well, who the heck are you going to do it on? You know, what better population to study than kids who are suffering that their behavior is so bad that we have to put them in a cage? Who else are you going to do it on, right? I mean, that's so silly. High protein, low carbohydrate diet. Remember, Atkins diet. And some people can decrease the frequency of seizures, and I think these are what we would call behavioral seizures. Now, I know some of you are struggling, because it's like, well, what about choice? What about responsibility? We all don't have the same level. I wish it was true. We all did. It has to do with frontal lobe function and temporal lobe function. And God knows that. That's why it says in the Bible, don't judge people. It's our natural tendency, especially if we want to have things our way. Believe the way I believe, or you're in deep trouble. Limbic ADD. What we saw is their emotional systems were flamed. And it looked like depression. but their brains were a combination of depression and ADD. So that's why we call it limbic ADD. They have all the ADD symptoms, and not like depression, which cycles. They've had this ever since they were a child. The handwriting stuff, the inattention, the distractibility, the disorganization. But in addition, the glass is half empty. Just listen to their speech. And out of 10 things that they say consecutively, 8 of them will be hopeless, or they will be negative. They just tend to twist things or spin things in a negative way. I say they have a high ANT population. ANT stands for automatic negative thoughts, the thoughts that come into your mind automatically. If you just listen to the speech, you didn't know anything about them, what you'd see is they have a lot of negativity associated with them. Often low motivation, they have little joy in their life, sleep and appetite problems, they may be more isolated. They meet all the criteria for ADD though. So what we see, increased activity in the limbic part of the brain and decreased activity in the front with concentration. Now why isn't it just depression? Well, with depression on imaging, what we see is low activity in the frontal lobes at rest. And when they concentrate, they get better. That's why many people who are depressed, if you can get them to do something, they do better. If you can get them to volunteer. You know, they don't feel like working out, but if you can get them out of bed and go work out, they feel better. They don't feel like going to work, or they don't feel like going to church. But if you can get them to church, then they feel better. Limbic ADD, low at rest in their prefrontal cortex, and low when they concentrate. We use stimulating antidepressants. Wellbutrin is great treatment for this time. This is where I would think about Strattera. Now, if they have limbic and cingulate, Effexor would be the right one, because Effexor has a little bit of serotonin that will help relax their cingulate gyrus. Now, sometimes you have to give them a stimulant too, but if you do it first, you usually make them weepy. Exercise helps everybody. The last type, we call it the Ring of Fire. And how did it get that title? When you looked at their brains, it looked like the Kilauea volcano. It's like, wow, everything is just working way too hard. I did my child psychiatry training in Hawaii, so I would go to the Kilauea volcano, and as I would see these eruptions of flames, I just went, that's what these brains are like, these poor kids. Now, maybe bipolar equivalent. Is bipolar disorder and ADD associated with each other? Well, it's interesting. If you have ADD, you get diagnosed with ADD, you are not likely to be bipolar. If, on the other hand, you get diagnosed with bipolar, you are likely to be ADD. In one study from Harvard, 50% of the children admitted with bipolar disorder also met the criteria for ADD. So we think maybe this is an early bipolar equivalent. But we think it's much more complicated than that. It could be an autoimmune disorder. It could be a serious allergy. There's something going on that we are not aware of, where there is an inflammatory or an increased reaction. They're very easily distracted. They have too many thoughts. They're very hyperactive, very verbal. I mean, more so. These are the ones that get diagnosed when they're 3 years old or 4 years old. They tend to be aggressive, sensitive to light, sound, taste, moody, and their behavior comes in waves. Now, they always have the ADD symptoms, but you see they get these horrible, horrible times, and they're like okay for a while. Horrible time, and then they're okay for a while. These people, do not put them on a stimulant first. Use anticonvulsants or the new novel antipsychotic, and then maybe you'll put them on a low dose of a stimulant later. If you do it first, in the study that we did, 70% of the time, you'll make them worse. That's a pretty high thing of making people worse. Okay, so those are the types. Now let's talk about treatment of ADD in general. Now, when we treat somebody, medicine only is bad treatment. But in this case, psychotherapy only is bad treatment, right? It's like you're doing software programming on people that have hardware problems. That doesn't all discount the need for your skills. They're critical. They may be the missing piece for a lot of families who've been on medicine, but they've never learned to stop yelling. Why do ADD families yell? It's adrenaline seeking. Parents are furious because they're like getting their adrenaline up. And kids are bad so they can get their moms to yell at them. I mean, you know, your mom may be worth 10 milligrams of Ritalin. So the first thing I do in ADD families is say no more yelling. And if you stop yelling, your child, I will predict this, will be worse for 3 weeks. Because they're going, where's my drug? Where's my fix? They're in withdrawal. But you have to lower your voice. It'll frighten them even more. Stop yelling. Don't hit them. I'm not totally opposed to spanking. I'm opposed to spanking ADD children because you'll lose control. Child Protective Service may come to your door. It's a very bad thing. Okay, we're going to look at these things. Education is critical. People need to know about what they have. It's why I write, besides I like writing. It's important to educate people. So I encourage them to go to conferences or lectures, to get really great books, like one I wrote on ADD. There's a group called the CHAD organization that puts out a magazine called Attention Magazine. There's also great websites. You can get a lot of great information on ADD, Medscape, and WebMD. I did an internet chat a month ago or so on WebMD. It's amazing how many people visit these things. So this is on patient education. This is Gary Larson. It says in the animal self-help section. And some of the books are Do It by Instinct, Dare to be Nocturnal. My favorite one is How to Avoid Natural Selection. Social support. It's huge. You do an ADD support group, that's a good thing. Why? Because people get support. I encourage them to join CHAD. CHAD is an international group dedicated to helping families, children, and adults who have attention deficit disorder. And chad.org, O-R-G, you can learn a lot of great information about ADD. There are internet chat groups. We have one at amenclinic.com. We have a forum where people are talking to each other all the time. Group therapy can sometimes be really helpful. And social support is not a minor treatment. Just to tell you about a breast cancer study they did at Stanford. They took women who had metastatic breast cancer, bad breast cancer. And one group got good medical treatment. The other group, good medical treatment plus one 90-minute support group a week. That's it. That was the only difference. On average, they followed the women for 5 years. On average, the women who went to the support group lived twice as long. Now they've repeated the study and they got the same result. Social support is good for your brain. It's good for your health. Now, a couple of things on medication. Education is essential. I have my patients keep a daily log when I'm changing medication. I only start one medicine at a time. I write things down for patients because they don't remember. Patients only hear 30% of what their doctor says to them. I always check my patient's perception. Why are you taking this? Now, I've told them why they're taking it, but I want to hear from them, why are you taking it? Because sometimes I've heard later that they've called them their stupid pills. You don't want them to have that perception. So I go, why are you taking it? A couple of weeks ago, one of my teenagers said, well, Dr. Amen, I take this to prevent the prefrontal cortex deactivation that happens in my brain. I like that. Watch for changes when the medicines wear off, because sometimes rebound can happen and it can be really negative for people. Everything is not the medicine. Somebody's having a hard day. It could be they took their medicine with orange juice. It could be they went from brand name to generic. They just tend to be different. Not better or worse, just different. It could be they're under chronic stress. The medicine tends not to work as well when you're under physical or emotional stress. So during allergy season, the medicines don't work as well. Or if they have the flu, the medicines don't work as well. And then when you're thinking about medicine, think about systems. Don't think about diagnoses. You're depressed, take an SSRI. Think about singular gyrus, SSRI. Temporal lobes, anticonvulsant. Low prefrontal cortex, stimulant. Think about it in system pathology. The goal is not to be off medicine. That's a bad goal. The goal is best function. If you can do it without medicine, great. But so many times people make it their goal to be off medicine, and my thought is it should always be your best brain function. That should be the goal. And some people try to get away with the least amount of medicine possible. It's a bad goal. Why? Well, what if I went to the eye doctor and said, you know, this year I want really thin lenses. Now, why is that stupid? Because you want the lens that works for you. And for some people, it's a little tiny lens. And other people, it's like the bottom of a Coke bottle. Right? And it's the same thing. Dosage has nothing to do with height, weight, or age when it comes to ADD. My experience, nothing. And I have to tell you, there have been some years in the state of California, I wrote more prescriptions for stimulants than anybody in the state. How do I know that? Drug companies actually track it. So I was having drug reps coming to my door all the time. We like you, Dr. Raymond. Why do you like me so much? I figured out they were tracking what I was doing. I felt violated when I found that out. Now, some people are going to go, I don't want to take medicine. I'm scared of medicine. I heard on the Ricky Lake show that medicine makes you crazy. A lot of people on that show should be on medicine. I was on recently. It's actually going to air pretty soon. I'll let you know if I get an air date. It was pretty wild. But if they don't want to take medicine and they want to take something natural, these are options. But again, you want to think in system-specific way. So if they have low prefrontal cortex activity, we give them a dopamine building block, which is L-tyrosine. L-tyrosine is the amino acid building block for dopamine. So it's a little bit stimulating. If they have a cingulate and they want to take something natural, we'll use St. John's wort or something called 5-HTP. If they have limbic problems, we'll use DL-phenylalanine or SAMe. Those have both been used in depression, but they're stimulating. If they have temporal lobe problems, we may use GABA. And if they have the ring of fire, we use omega-3 fatty acids plus a compound called Teamlink, which is a combination of GABA, 5-HTP, and L-tyrosine. So there are options. I just want you to see that there are options, but again, it is system specific. So you can see these things really do have biological effects. This is a scan we did on and off GABA. Looking at their lifestyle is critical. You want to take less medicine? Help them change their lifestyle. Head injuries matter. I don't think it's a good idea to let children with ADD and learning disabilities play sports where there's a potential for brain injuries. I just don't think it's a good idea. Golf is good. Tennis, terrific. Table tennis is the world's best sport. Very few head injuries with table tennis. Avoid toxic substances. You need to educate them. You need to show them pictures of scans. Right? Normal brain, drug-affected brain. Which brain do you want? It's critical. Alcohol, drugs, nicotine, much caffeine. So who's worried about Starbucks but me? They're everywhere. We are a society that is addicted to caffeine, and it is prematurely aging our brains. Now, why is that a bad thing? Because you're taking years off somebody's life, potentially. SPECT scans and caffeine constricts blood flow to the brain. Makes your brain look lousy. Nicotine's no better. Many medicines can do that. If you are chronically sleep deprived, chronic sleep deprivation dramatically decreases activity of the brain. Puts you at risk for Alzheimer's disease. Manage stress, because stress hurts memory centers. That's why we should be teaching stress management to all of our patients. Relaxation, biofeedback, hypnosis, meditation, very helpful stuff. Exercise, boost blood flow to the brain, something we should all be doing. And limit video games. ADD kids gravitate to video games. Why? Because it's stimulating. When they're playing these action video games, they've actually done studies, imaging studies. They found that where dopamine is released in the brain, it's a place called the head of the caudate nucleus in the basal ganglia, all the dopamine gets released. I love this. I've just killed 40 people in 1 minute. This is so much fun. Well, what happens if you dump all the dopamine? You don't have any left. So you can't do your homework. And you can't do your chores. It's a bad thing. If they're going to play, you can play for half an hour only, after your homework is done, and after you get your chores done. I think you should limit it. And if you have the opportunity to break it in your house, it's okay with me. There's no constitutional right to Xbox. There is no constitutional right to PlayStation. It's just, you know. And the more they play these games, they've actually done some studies, they're finding that the representation for your thumb in the brain is getting larger. Now, how is that helpful for a human species? Who needs a large representation for their thumb? Hitchhikers. It's very good. Monkeys. This is like reverse evolution. We talk about feeding the ADD brain, by and large, lean protein, complex carbohydrates. One study by Keith Connors at Duke found that if you give children protein in the morning, their medicine lasts longer. Decrease simple sugars. And what do we feed them in the afternoon when they come home? I mean, if we just go through the ADD diet, you know, they get waffles in the morning, frozen waffles and liquid sugar, maple syrup, liquid sugar, along with orange juice, liquid sugar. And we wonder why they can't concentrate. If before you started classes, you went to Krispy Kreme and you got 4 donuts, how would you feel a half an hour later? Gross. You would feel gross. But what do we do to children? Frosted Flakes, Pop-Tarts, donuts, waffles, things that are fast so we can get out of the house fast. It's a scandal. And what do we give them when they come home after they've worked their little brains out at school all day? 4 Oreo cookies and a can of Coke. Sugar, sugar. And then we go, you can play your video game for half an hour, completely deplete dopamine, and then now you have to do your homework. And now I'm going to yell and scream at you for 4 hours so you'll get it done. Give them beef jerky. Actually, I recommend that people make homemade beef jerky. On my kitchen sink, there's a dehydrator. You know, don't give them beef jerky you buy in the store because it's filled with sugar. You just take a flank steak, cut it up, put Montreal steak seasoning on top of it, dry it. Tastes great. Kids like it. Give them deviled eggs, cream cheese and celery, broccoli and ranch dressing. Oh, how fun. I mean, there are things you can find that they like. Almonds. Nuts are filled with good kinds of omega-3 fatty acids. And they're nice snacks. Non-cingulate types. So all the types except overfocused. They do better with high-protein, low-carbohydrate diets. The Zone, Sugar Busters, Atkins. The new South Beach diet, very popular, which some people think is Atkins for girls because it's not as much, bacon. Prime rib. The cingulate types actually do better with complex and simple carbohydrates. There's a wonderful book called Potatoes, Not Prozac. All right. So what do I teach them with parenting? I do an 8-week parenting course. Actually, I have a book called New Skills for Frazzled Parents that summarizes this very nicely. But basically, I teach them about goals. I teach them about bonding. Bonding is so critical. Spend time with them. Because, often ADD kids are not bonded appropriately to their parents because they made them crazy. Parents don't want to spend time with them because they're tired of being mad. So you need to spend time with them. Because if you don't, if you're not properly bonded to a child, they can steal from you and it doesn't bother them. They can hurt you and it doesn't bother them. Clear expectations. I believe you should put rules up in the house. These are some of the ones I used to have up in my house when my kids were littler. Tell the truth. ADD kids lie. They lie a lot. So we have an exercise called truth training. And truth training is this. Sometimes you have trouble telling the truth. So sometimes I'm going to ask you questions I already know the answer to. And if you tell me the truth, I'll be so happy. And if you lie, you get a consequence for the bad thing you did, and you get a second consequence for lying. And then you have to sort of follow through. And it just causes them to think a little bit. You're like kicking in frontal lobe function before they do something. Tell the truth. Second one is we treat each other with respect. Now in parentheses you have to put, this means no hitting, no kicking, no biting, no name calling. The third one, my almost favorite rule, do what mom and dad say the first time. It's a critical rule. Why? Because if you don't have that belief that your child should do what you tell them to the first time, you may tell them 8 times. And the research studies say if you tell your child to do something more than 8 times, your chance of abusing that child skyrockets. But I'm thinking to myself, who's the idiot if you tell them 8 times? You know? What are you doing? You're training them that they don't have to listen until you get wacko. Do what mom and dad say the first time. So if they don't, you can say, whoa, the rule is do it the first time. Do it now, or this is the consequence. You'd be very clear and very directed. The fourth rule, and this is my favorite rule, no arguing with parents. I love that rule. Now in parentheses I put, as your parents, we want to hear your opinion. More than twice constitutes arguing. These are kids, I had one parent, she said her son would follow him around the house for 2.5 hours asking her the same question. You get nervous after that. I mean, you get unglued after that. Unbalanced. Right? I remember my little one, because she had over-focused issues. I want to go to this concert. No. I want to go to this concert. Caitlin, I said no. If you ask me again, this is the consequence. You're going to be grounded all weekend. Now, it's okay with me if you want to ask me again. You want to test. It's okay. What do you want to do? She just turned and walked away. Because you have to be clear with them. If you allow a child to argue with you, their cingulate gyrus gets hotter. Behavior therapy works for people who have OCD. Behavior therapy works for oppositional defiant disorder kids. But you got to teach them to be superior parents. That's just some examples of the rules. And then you got to notice them. You got to notice more what you like than what you don't like. And that is not natural for ADD kids. It is so not natural. Let's see what time. Okay. So I collect penguins. If you came into my office, you would see I have 1,100 penguins in my office. And I've bought like 3 of them. But I tell this story and people just buy them for me. I used to live in Hawaii. I did my child psychiatry training in Hawaii. And when my son was 7, after I taught this parent training course, I realized I needed to spend more time with him. And so I said, what do you want to do today? And I want to go to Sea Life Park. And Sea Life Park is like SeaWorld. They have sea animal shows. And so I took him. It was just him and me the whole day. And we had a wonderful day. We went to the killer whale show, and we went to the dolphin show. And it was very cool. And at the end of the day, he grabbed my belt and he said, I want to go see Fat Freddy. Who's Fat Freddy? He's the penguin. They had a penguin show. And so I found out where it was. There was one show left for the day. And we went into this big stadium and sat down with all these people. And this big fat penguin comes out. And he climbs a 20-foot, steps to a 20-foot high diving board, goes to the end, bounces, and then jumps in the water. I'm like, whoa. And his name was Fat Freddy. Fat Freddy gets out. He then, on command, bowls with his nose, counts with his flipper, jumps through a hoop of fire. I'm like, wow. I have my arm around my son thinking, I'm such a good father. Spending time with your boy. And then the trainer asked Freddie to go get something. Freddie went and got it, and he brought it right back. And in my mind, I went, whoa. I asked this kid to get something for me, And he wants to have a discussion for like 20 minutes. And then he doesn't want to do it. And I knew my son was smarter than the penguin. So I went up to the trainer afterwards. And I said, how did you get Freddie to do all these really cool things? And I'm in training. I don't know what's going on at this point. And she looks at me, and then she looks at my son. And she said, you know, unlike parents, whenever Freddie does anything like what I want him to do, I notice him. I give him a hug, and I give him a fish. And even though my son didn't like fish, I mean, I knew what was going on. I wasn't paying enough attention to him. So when he was good, I'm a busy guy, I was sort of distracted. When he wasn't, I gave him a lot of attention because I didn't want to raise bad kids. So if you just focus on the things you don't like, those are often the only things that you will see. So, I mean, obviously it's the psychological concept of shaping. Got to notice what you like. And ADD parents, because they are negative seeking, because they're adrenaline seeking, they notice what makes them crazy. You got to teach them to notice what you like more than what you don't like. I mean, what do you think Freddie would have done if he was having a bad day? And say the trainer is like 3 days premenstrual. And all of a sudden, Freddie doesn't do what he's supposed to do, and the trainer starts screaming at him. You stupid penguin! I can't ever believe I met a penguin. You are the worst penguin I ever met. We're going to replace you. We're going to ship you back to the Antarctic. You're going to have to go swimming for your food. What do you think he would have done? Well, if he would have understood her, depending on his temperament, he may have bitten her or gone off to a corner and cried. But what do you do to the people in your life when they don't do what you want them to do? Do you believe it's your God-given right to give them hell? To be in their face? Or do you spend time noticing what you like more than what you don't like? If you want to shape behavior, you got to notice what you like. And that just doesn't happen in these houses. Now, it's very important to have good discipline. But when we teach parent training, we don't teach discipline until week 6. Why? Because we want time for the medicine to work. We want time for bonding to happen. We want the rules up. We want them noticing what they like more than what they don't like. And when you think of discipline, very simple rules. Never discipline when you're mad. Never discipline when you're out of control. It's always okay to take 10-minute time out yourself. I tell parents, take 5 deep belly breaths. You know, from your belly, deep as you can, slow and deep. Get some oxygen to your brain so you'll make a good decision. Right? Consequences need to be quick, clear, and unemotional. Because if you discipline children with a lot of emotion, yeah, you might get them to mind that time. But they're going to figure out how they made you crazy. And they're going to make you crazy again because they're addicted to that. The last thing we can talk about is supervision. You got to supervise these kids at their emotional age, not at their chronological age. You know what I mean by that? Kids who get into the most trouble are kids who have parents that aren't watching. You have to watch. You need to know where they are, who they're with, what they're doing, and you have to check. And they're going to go when they're 16. You don't trust me. And my comment always was, so? I was your age once. Trust comes when your behavior is consistently trustworthy. That's why I have to check. And kids hate when you check. They hate you if you don't check, because that means you don't care. With schools, schools are required by law to provide accommodations for ADD kids if their ADD is interfering with their ability to learn. The schools have a process called student study teams. If it's just ADD, they do something called a 504 accommodation plan. If it's ADD plus a learning disability, they have something called an individualized educational plan. But you know, special services are their right under federal law. And often schools will not do it for it, and it's just critical that you push them because they know they're supposed to. The best teaching strategies for kids who have ADD is watch your emotional tone. Your relationship is key. If they love you, they do better. Love is a drug. That gives them more adrenaline. They learn best with something we call relaxed stimulation. Put them under a ton of pressure, they don't do well. But make it interesting and fun, and they tend to get it. Encourage students to learn about ADD. So many of my ADD patients have done reports on ADD. And meet with them a lot. The kids with ADD who get in trouble are kids where there's been no meetings, but now it's the first report card period, and they have D's and F's. You got to watch, which is basically a frontal lobe function. You need to supervise them regularly. They do best with teachers who are stimulating, relaxed, good social skills, teachers who are structured, and teachers who believe in ADD. ADD is not a religious issue. I mean, it makes me a little crazy, but there are ADD atheists out there. They don't believe. There are ADD agnostics, teachers who don't know and don't care. And then there's some ADD believers. Everybody has ADD. In the classroom, put them where you can see them, where the teacher has direct eye contact, away from noise, door, distractions. Up front's probably the best place, nothing between them and the teacher. Better in U-shaped classrooms rather than in rows, non-ADD kids around them. Don't put ADD kids next to each other unless you're masochistic. Ask kids where they learn best, because they may tell you about things that bother them that you never even noticed about the classroom. And encourage interactions. If you just lecture at them, they'll zone out at you. You got to sort of make it as interactive as possible. A lot of people go, well, what structure? I was an Army major for a number of years. I was an Army psychiatrist for 7 years. It's routine. I mean, often these kids do great in the military because there's structure. You know, people know what's expected. The things are really well defined. Rules are posted. They consistently enforce them. They give you rewards and they give you consequences, and they do it unemotionally. The military is the ultimate good mother. Clear rules, positive reinforcement, clear discipline. Sometimes we provide accommodations for kids. We'll recommend things like extra time on tests, because when they push, their mind goes blank. Get their tests in a quiet room. Sometimes, because many of them have handwriting problems, take their tests orally, their essay tests orally. More objective items with writing. Clarify what's going to be on the test. Sometimes we get them note takers. Actually, junior colleges are the best I've ever seen at providing accommodations for kids. They'll give them a note taker, provide the teacher's notes. They just focus the student on what's important. Lots of these kids have sleep problems, and adults as well. These are just some things that you can think about that might be helpful. You know, simple things like a glass of warm milk with a tablespoon of real vanilla in it at night. Warm it up. Tastes like a warm vanilla milkshake. Often will make them sleep, or get them a warm bath or a foot rub. There's a tape series called Brain Train that we make that's made with a special sound machine that helps the brain tune into a sleepy rhythm. Some self-hypnosis can be really helpful. And then supplements and then meds. But you know, meds is not the first thing you think about when somebody has trouble sleeping. The dark side of ADD is suicide is much more common. Why? What are the risk factors for suicide? Impulsivity, failure, loss, moves, social alienation, relationship breakups. All of those things are highly associated with ADD and suicide. The one thing I didn't put in risk factors is substance abuse. 52% of untreated ADD adults abuse substances. Well, what if treatment isn't working? Well, you got to get a clear diagnosis. I mean, maybe it's one of these varieties of ADD that people don't think about. Maybe they've never been on the right balance of medication. Maybe they have interfering factors like they're taking their medicine with orange juice, or they're under chronic stress at work. Or they've done the ADD thing where they try it for a day, it doesn't work, so they stop it. Okay. With effective intervention, ADD people are wonderful people to treat because they get better. I mean, it is so cool. You can really change somebody's life. Saves money in the long run. You may save somebody's life and improve generations. Well, they get distracted very easily. So things like noise. Now, type 3 are, we call it over-focused type. They have to have things just perfect. But what you find is in the type 3, the over-focused group, is they have areas that are perfect and areas that were a nightmare. So if you would have come in my house, the front room, the living room, was perfect. Nobody went in the front room. In fact, if the cats went in, the cats would have to get that little roller thing and clean up after themselves. Oh my God, it was that sort of OCD-ish. Am I lying? But if you went in her closet, stuff would fall on you. So they have these islands of organization. You know, they come up with lots of different ways to sort of manage the chaos and the anxiety. Some people, they become race car drivers because they just need that. Other people, especially if they tend to be more anxious, I mean, they seek meditation. They seek prayer. They seek things that, you know, and that's sort of the interesting thing is not everybody's the same. Many people are very different. The types tend to run in families. So if you have over-focused ADD, you tend to see it in other people who have over-focused issues. But ADD is also associated with head injury. You know, if you're doing a conflict-seeking sport, like playing tackle football, you could have ADD and then get a head injury. Well, that wouldn't be genetic. Yeah, I like Effexor better than almost any other antidepressant because it doesn't crash your frontal lobes. The other ones make you happy and stupid. Now, not for everybody. Some people's frontal lobes are so hot, you got to take them down. But a lot of people complain of what we call an amotivational syndrome. Many doctors are, and many aren't. The DSM-4 lists 3 different types of ADD. So, you know, the idea of subtyping this has been around for a long time. But unfortunately, the bulk of people who treat ADD are not specialists. Child psychiatrists are a shortage specialty in the US. It's hard to get in to see one. So by and large, pediatricians and family doctors are doing most of the medicine. Now, as counselors and therapists, often family practice doctors will look to you for ideas. Now, you always have to be very careful, if you're not a doctor, on how you talk to doctors. It's very important because, you know, MD stands for minor deity. And so you never tell a doctor what to do. But you can say things like, you know, he's got temper problems. He's got memory problems. His panic that just comes out of the blue. His mood is unstable. If this guy knows anything about psychopharmacology, he's going to put him on an anticonvulsant. So you have to sort of think about how you say things to the physician. But often you're going to know more about it than they will. If I think they're bipolar, no way I'll put them on a stimulant. If I think they have a ring of fire and really it's primarily ADD, I'm going to pre-treat them with an anticonvulsant and then I might use a stimulant. I get very concerned with it. But I put them on stimulants because, you know, really primarily they're inattentive. And sometimes stimulants help. You just have to know you may make them worse. And so you warn them ahead of time that you may in fact make them worse. A lot of coffee is not good for you. Now, if you have 1 or 2 cups a day, it's probably okay. That's it. And not the Greek syrup coffee. Those maybe half a cup a day. Type 2, it would be L-tyrosine. L-tyrosine, Tyrosine. So it's the first one for prefrontal cortex. How do I feel about the research that says kids who are on medicine are likely to abuse? There's actually better research that says they won't. And that's totally my experience. Now, there's some interesting research brand new with mice. And what it finds that mice who they give stimulants to, when they give them cocaine later in life, they're not interested in it. But they also found that those same mice that got stimulants, when they came up against a stressful situation, they gave up more easily. So, you know, stimulants aren't like all great for everybody. And there's a lot about them that we don't know about. But when it comes to the issue of drug abuse, if you treat ADD, there's a dramatic less chance of them having a substance abuse problem because they're more successful in school. So they'll hang out with people who are more successful in school. They'll have better self-esteem. But you can't just treat them for like 6 months and then go on. Because if you just treat them for a little bit, afterwards they're still 100% ADD. Right? ADD, treating ADD with medicine is like giving people glasses. You know, the good long-term thing it's doing for them is it's helping their self-esteem. It's giving them the sense that they can accomplish.